Getting started.
Talk shoes. Recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 657. My name is Eric Nelson, and I do not have a co-host today because everybody's out getting ready for Explore in various manners. Today is Wednesday, August 16th, 2023. And let's get started. First off, welcome everybody. It is beautiful summertime in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. It is warm, 85, 88, going to be 89 by the time we're done. So it is that August time of the year with us where it's dry, warm. Color of the bay is just a smooth green, not much wind going on. A lot of sailboats out in the bay this time of year. So we're happy about that. What's going on in the news? Well, before we get to the news, on the show today, we're going to be talking about sovereign cloud strategy with Guy Bartram. Guy is a director of cloud product marketing at VMware, so we'll get to him. He's been on the show before. If you want to listen to what he's talked about in the past, you can go listen to podcast 587 back in November 2021. But before we do that, we'll do the news. What's happening? Of course, what's happening? Explore's happening. Everybody's traveling to Explore. Still not too late to come. Get yourself some tickets and head on down to Vegas. I know that you can still get at the Excalibur for $35 a night. So swing in. You'll have to get yourself a ticket. We gave away all of our tickets. Corey gave away the blogger tickets. We gave away some of the community tickets we purchased. So now you're on your own to get in, but there will be the pinball party on Tuesday night. That's you can get in. Don't even need to have a conference pass to probably get in there. We'll be at the front door. Just come up, say hello to Corey or myself and get in there. Going to be fun. We got quarters, we got pinball machines, we ordered 200 pizzas. I think we're got about 500 people are going to show up. So that's going to be happening. So if you want to swing by Vegas, get yourself a cheap flight and come on by, you can at least play pinball with us that night. But if you get a pass, I'm sure there will be some kind of day passes that are happening. They usually don't announce that, but they usually do it. So hey, it's not too late. Come on by and say hello to everybody. I know they've exceeded their targets by like 28% above targets. So it'll be 10,000 plus people at the event, which was I think 3,000 more than last year. So we're on the upward swing. So should be a lot of fun. The hackathon's happening all day Monday from noon until midnight or noon until 11 p.m. With prizes. 10 teams are filling up. You can come by, lurk. We're going to have food, pretzels, sodas, drinks. We're not going to be doing alcohol at the hackathon. So if that's your gig, don't come to the hackathon because we're going to be coding and then we're doing presentations of the cool coding projects. The teams have been hacking for the last 2 months. So it should be fun to see what all the teams have worked on. If you haven't want to and you want to drop in, you can work with us. We are doing the code labs, the REST API, Chat GPT REST API usage, and then being able to upload your own plugin to Chat GPT to customize your own answers. So should be fun. We'll probably have a little hackathon team there that you can drop in and use that API to practice if you happen to do a lab on Monday. We'll be there in the evening to kind of have a fun time with that. And then there's just everybody hanging out. So come by the hackathon. The hackathon will be in the eating area. We've got a curtained off area that will be there from 12 noon all the way up till probably midnight, where we're going to be running a hackathon. The party is happening on Wednesday night. I never really heard what it was. I think it's a pool. I did hear it's a pool party. So I think it's at the Venetian pool. They did that a few years ago. It was a lot of fun. Everybody just hanging out, drinking, and trying not to get thrown in pool and ruin your iPhone. Nowadays, iPhones are waterproof, so I guess that's not an issue. So, but should be good. Come to your labs, code labs, the code theater, the V Brown Bag Theater, everything's booked up should be happy. We've got Spring One is going to be at the hub. They've got some sessions, so there's going to be different developer sessions using Spring that's going to be happening. VMUG is in the community booth this time, so VMUG reps are going to be there. So swing by, say hello to VMUG. I know they're doing some fun stuff as well. We've got the espresso bar in the hub. You can come do a couple little champion challenges around, and then get yourself a token and get yourself an espresso, hazelnut. They're going to have flavors. So we got that going on. That was a lot of fun in 2019. Everybody got a decent, latte or espresso out of the gig. And, usually you could stand in line to get a few of them if you want to. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun this year. I'm really looking forward to it. We also will be at Explore Europe. So if you are in Europe, November 6th through the 9th, we will be doing very similar things. We're going to have the code booth, the ChatGPT API lab sessions. The VBrabag booth will be in Europe, as well as the hackathon. So again, pretty much the same footprint in Europe this year, November 6th to the 9th. Looking forward to that. I think that's it for news of the day, because we're just getting ready to go. We're all traveling out there Saturday for setup on Sunday, and the show kicks off on Monday. I do believe that there is a V Rockstar party happening Sunday night. So if you're in on Sunday, you can hang out with the community by hitting up the V Rockstar guys and getting an invite into that party. If you get registered, you don't have to wait in a line as long. So, all right, that's about it for the news. So let's get to our guest, Guy Bartram. Guy, we've had you on the show before, so we always start out with tell us a little bit about your career arc. A 2-minute elevator pitch. How did you get where you are here today?
Thanks, Eric. So I'm based in the UK. I'm product marketing director, for our cloud providers, and there's about 4,000 of them in VMware. How did I get here today? Long journey. Been in the trade, started as network engineering, coding. Actually, I was just thinking when you said there's no alcohol at the coding show, I was thinking, I remember I was better with alcohol at coding. At least I thought I was. Then moved into kind of OSS and support systems, service activations. I worked with telcos on DSL projects and MPLS projects. And then really just started kind of getting into the software world when all of the CLI started getting phased into XML, and things were being orchestrated by EMS systems and OSS systems. That's kind of where I went, and worked at CA previous to VMware. I was there for about 7 years before they were bought by Broadcom. I was the cloud product manager in that role, and then came to VMware, where we have our what is now called Cloud Service Provider Program, the old VCPP program for those who haven't heard the new term yet, and started running strategy and advisory, then moved into competitive, did a couple of years competitive intelligence for cloud providers, and then I started in marketing, and here I am.
That's a reasonably common career arc, right? Climbing up. I would say that especially if you're over on the BU side, and I don't know if you're marketing in the BU side or what group you report up into, but the tech marketing BU people, just very common, right? Like you're usually have implemented the product out customer sites, worked at technology companies, the technology, you come in and now you're providing guidance for the direction of the products themselves, right? Which means
That's right.
Yeah, it's quite different over here in community and social marketing. We get one or two guys like myself. I came from tech marketing and I came from engineering. And so some of us are still around, but a lot of the marketers are also not that. They're just pure marketing. Digital marketing is the bane of existence, because they grow up a bunch of digital marketers who think they market, but then they've never worked in a data center. They don't know the products. They really have never even set up vSphere, right? So you're like, oh, yeah. Okay. They bring skills to the table, so it takes a village, so it's fine. So now right. The buzzword and the reason we brought you on is because there's some blog blog articles out there. It's trending. This whole topic of sovereign cloud and what happened. I thought everybody was fairly happy with GPDR or GP something R, and it was we were settled in that I had to accept my cookies now. But it seems like things have changed. So why don't you take us a bit through the topic at a high level? What's going on, and then what is VMware doing about it? We'll get into that.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, GDPR was kind of the first instantiation of really EU-led but global effort really to start looking at data privacy and start looking at the privacy of people and citizens and understanding how their data is being used. And that's now extended. Cloud has, been incredibly useful. It's changed the ICT industry permanently. And with that, data has been moved around. And, one of the big problems with cloud is you don't always know where your data is. And also, you don't always know who has access to your data, who's supporting your data, how the accounting, data is being consumed, whether there's anything that's being exposed. And there's a clear kind of need to have some sort of security around the usage of cloud. And we've seen that obviously in technical implementations, but when it comes to privacy and data, these are things that sovereign cloud really has risen up to try and address. And, it's a lot more than just data residency, which people think is fine. It's in the country, so it must be okay. It might be in a hyperscaler data center in the country. That's great. I'm good. And you're not actually good, because one of the things that kind of came to light with the previous data privacy framework, which the EU pushed forward, was a guy called Mark Schrems, who just kind of ripped it apart based on a use case with Facebook. And, clearly there was the ability for foreign jurisdictions to use data without necessarily the knowledge of the citizen, and to use that for, marketing or whatever it was being used for. And that's a breach of, the citizens' rights if they haven't signed up to that. So it stemmed from that, and it's now become really inflated, particularly with geopolitical tensions, war in Ukraine, China, Taiwan, North Korea, you name it. And national security is becoming more and more important. And it's not just national security and public sector. It's financial organizations. It's organizations who are suppliers to different enterprises of regulated trade. They could be pharmaceutical companies. They could be banks. They could be healthcare organizations. Whatever it is, you've got data on citizens that is under EU law. It's a sole responsibility of each kind of member state. So we have, in one hand, 50 or so countries in the EU, all developing their own legislation to guide their companies within their territory to understand the simple fact that it's not all about data residency, it's about jurisdictional control. So legally, who has jurisdictional control over the data? And what's come to light with the data privacy framework and what Mark Schrems did was that even if you're in a hyperscale environment, that hyperscale is owned and operated and a US entity, even though it might be located in the UK. And hence it's under US jurisdictional control. So that means that in theory, the US could, or Secret Service or whatever the national security services are out there, they could have access to your data. Officially, they should go through, a request court. But what's become kind of a little bit apparent is that this happens without going through those processes sometimes. And it can be expedited for, terrorism and espionage and other things that are of national interest. So on one hand, you've got, these member states of the EU and non-EU countries around the world, like in Asia, for example, sovereign cloud's a big thing. You've got them bringing up their own legislation. And then you've got the EU, who is trying to do something very good, but obviously has the problem that these states are all in, a different kind of maturity of their capabilities around privacy. So the EU's got the complex task of applying legislation EU-wide over existing territories that have their own legislation. And we've seen some clear kind of counter, I won't say counterproductive, but, some clashing legislation, let's say, with tight security required in certain countries that the EU is not legislating enough for. Whereas for other countries, it might be absolutely fine. So sovereign cloud has really, been driven on the fact that we are going through an evolution, a geopolitical evolution. Everyone is now much more conscious around the usage of your data. And that can be, data of national security. It can be IP. The way to think about your data is looking at classification levels. And we kind of have 3 or 4 classification levels. If it's like top secret, that needs to be kept in a sovereign environment, isolated, air-gapped, no internet connectivity, no SaaS platforms can access to it and manage it. Then you have secret, which is kind of the level below. And potentially that could be, and, this first one would be like a dedicated private cloud. The second one could be a dedicated private cloud, or it could be a shared cloud, as long as there is key management and logging and auditing and compliance within that cloud. But it can't be in a hyperscaler. It has to be in the cloud of the national jurisdiction.
Right.
And then you get into the other levels, which get more and more applicable to, hey, it doesn't really matter about where that data goes because it's of no importance to us.
Yeah. I always thought that, when the first policy iteration of this came out and just said it just has to reside in a data center in the country that the customer resides in, right, or the client resides in, or their data resides in. I always thought that was kind of odd because, like, okay, all we have to do now is go spin up some VMs over in another. I still have root access. I still have database access. I can still like, what does that get you, right? Now I can see that it was like the first iteration. Like, at least it's got some lightweight jurisdictional control because it's in the country, and maybe the laws that apply to running data centers might apply to the servers, but it didn't make any sense, right? That, the entity Facebook or whoever, small company X, Y, or Z is, still got access to all that data, and therefore a new version of this would have to come out. And I was reading your blog, and we'll do a shout out to the blog if you want to go read a little bit about how this came about and the history and the timeline. Guy has written a blog. It's on the cloud provider blog. So blogs.vmware.com/cloud provider, all one word. And you can go there and you can search on his name, Guy Bartram, Bartram. And you can see his article is right there. He's a blogger. You can click on him. You can go to Google and search on it as well, Guy Bartram. But the article is, will the new EU-US privacy framework affect EU digital sovereignty, right? .html. So you'll see it, you'll go look at it, but it takes you through that timeline of the court cases that were actually happening. And, now Biden has issued a presidential order. This is all on the blog that forces, is accelerating the need to build a new policy that kind of addresses some of this and addresses Europe's concern, right? Like, over access to that data from foreign governments, which I think was interesting. So it feels like now this has moved into an accelerated policy model where, new laws will come out that everybody has to be, pay attention to, right? How are operators staying up to speed on this? Like, or, are they actually, the laws haven't been put in place yet, or some of them are like, I guess you're in a country and you just have to have an expert that knows about this. And then we'll get into, like, what is VMware doing in order to provide help in this area?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's just think about the kind of potential exposure here. Classically, we think of data, whether it's data that's stored in a database for an application, or data that's stored in, flat files, or whatever the data might be. and it could hold, what we would standard with GDPR classify privacy. It might be a credit card, it might be your address, it could be your blood type, it could be a load of different things, right? That's one side of it. Now, let's compound that with data about the systems that you're using and you're deployed on. So, for example, if I'm running the energy of the UK, nuclear energy, let's say, and I've got hosts that have got IP addresses, I don't want any of those hosts' IP addresses, whether they're internal or external, exposed outside. And I don't want host names exposed as well, because those could be used, hackers can piece together very small pieces of information now and build a bigger picture for an attack. So the data needs to be considered in its totality, not just at the operational level, but also at the administration level from an accounting perspective and a support perspective. So most people are using like ServiceNow or SFDC. Where are those instances and what data are they actually holding? And those have got to be really important questions that people should ask in their organization. Are we exposing host IP addresses, customer names, any privacy information that we shouldn't be exposing? And that's a really hard task. Just to get that classification done is a hard task, but then to understand all of the systems of consequence is even harder. Now let's compound that even more and let's throw in data science and development. How often does a developer come to you and talk to you about data privacy concerns, or can we, use these IP addresses in our deployments? They don't. And there's a significant liability to organizations who are not mandating data classification and understanding where the data is being used across the board, right? From your data center operations teams through to your networking, through your accounts and supports and finance. GDPR was kind of someone else's problem in the organization. The only thing I had to know about it was I couldn't share someone else's data with an external entity. And as far as I was concerned, that was simple enough. But from, this new level of criteria and decision-making, of which, I talk about it in the blogs, there will be penalties. If you're not complying, and some of these are going to be like audited, like the EUCS will be audited by a conformity assessment board. There will be penalties to pay. And this is why I'm saying now, look, get in front of this, because, this legislation, a lot of it isn't in play yet. But if it does come into play, you don't want to be caught short with your cloud strategy, your cloud decision.
Well, it's funny that you bring this up, because most of the people that are listening to this a lot of them are vExperts, and we got audited. We run the vExpert app out on AWS, right? It was just the way that we hired a vendor to do it. A community member helped build it, and we put it on an AWS instance, and it sits on vexpert.vmware.com domain, and therefore we got audited. First time ever. We've had the app up for like 5 years. We got audited from the security group, right? Because we're on a VMware domain, and all of these questions came up, right? Like, where is our data sitting, right? It's on AWS. Do you have other instances? Do you have other versions of the app? Are you crossing data boundaries, right? Like how? And now we're in an audit. I actually had to cut another, $25K PO to the vendor just to make it through the audit. And yeah, they're right. The security group is right, because we actually never, you get back to, the guys that are working on our development, they're building the SaaS app for us for the vExpert program. And we never asked any of this, right? We just get AWS, build it up, put it on MySQL, and, we just never answered any of these questions, let alone we do have Europe vExperts that give us their data that we put in a database, and keep track of their badges and their features and what they're educated on, and their resume. Now we have a resume function. You can go upload all your where you work.
A lot of private data.
Yeah, it's a lot of private data that we you just don't think from a developer standpoint. You're thinking about building the app, how to build the app, how to make the app run, how to make it scale. Yep. You just didn't think, hey, what about vulnerability of this data? And by the way, we're operating in Europe. yeah, we're probably breaking laws. So there is that.
Yeah.
And now we have had to hold off, releasing several of the other communities. CTAB has one, and we're doing an academic community that's in a very similar type of implementation of the same platform. And we've had to delay the project by a quarter or two because we have to address this. So it does sneak up on you. And then all of a sudden you're, spending money and time, and your schedules are all done because you have this issue, which is a good issue. So it is interesting.
Well, it's not to say that, I think part of the problem is that, one, there's that like consideration. So companies should start, we do the assessments, and VMware obviously, did the assessment on your solutions as well. Not all companies are as due diligent as that, which is, one thing to say. And two, we need to understand data from its full usage end to end, and particularly we need to understand metadata. And that's really important because people will just look at the kind of primary source. They don't look at actually the data about the data and how that gets used in other systems. That's another kind of key play. And I think a lot of this hasn't been helped. There's been a fair amount of like, how would I call it, sovereign washing in the market. We've seen all the hyperscalers make announcements about their sovereign solutions. It's really clouded people's kind of knowledge of what sovereignty is all about. And VMware's been really kind of straight down the line with this. It has to be an independent operating body under the jurisdictional control of the nation wherein it exists. That's simple as that. If you're putting anything else in hyperscaler, it's fine for certain levels of data, unless you go into like secret and top secret. But then you should look at, key management, encrypting your data and other kind of facilities to make sure that data can't be exposed. And there's a bunch of stuff to take into account, not only from, a data privacy perspective and data protection perspective, but also there's, laws coming in around sustainability and sustainable reporting of data center energy consumption, which is another thing that, I think cloud consumers need to understand as they move. Again, this question of moving to cloud is like outsourcing your systems. You're outsourcing your energy consumption to a third-party data center. You move from scope 1 or 2 greenhouse gas protocol to scope 3, where you have no control over what the supplier is they're using and stuff like that. So a lot of these considerations around cloud, around the impact of AI, around data privacy and stuff, that's what the EU is trying to wrap up really. And it's going to be an evolving job. They're not going to create something that's, going to fit the bill 100%, as we saw with the data privacy framework first time. It's going to take multiple iterations. But something that's really interesting, we had a sovereign cloud day in Brussels in July. And we got a lot of the EU legislation to kind of turn up and talk at that. And it was for, customers and providers. And one of the really interesting things was, and I didn't really consider this, but when you think about it, this all makes 100% sense, is something that the EU called the circular economy. And this is, going to the, what do they call the World's Financial Organization, in Davos. So the name escapes me for a minute, but this is to their kind of mantra that you own nothing and you'll be happy. And the reason why they're calling it a circular economy is because typically our economy is what they call flat, right? We buy something, we consume it, we throw it in the bin, we move on. This is about buying or renting something as a service, consuming it, and then giving it back so it can be reused or repurposed into something else. And to do that, they're bringing in something called the digital product passport, where they're going to create data on every single component and piece. Imagine an electric car, right? The batteries.
Oh, interesting. Of every component, there will be a data component to that component. Yeah,
exactly. And this digital product passport will be used to identify the component's history, servicing, ownership, material sourcing, all that sort of stuff. So when it comes to the time that it needs to be repurposed, the components can be broken down and they can be reused. And I think the EU has several trillion euros set aside to sponsor new businesses to do this. So take your data center server, right? When it's out of its productive life cycle, we typically shift them off to charities or wherever, whoever wants them, right? They're useless. Right. So now with Digital Product Passport, you'd be able to say, well, actually, the CPUs in those are perfectly good, and we'll be able to use them in our, IoT solution for tractors and establish new businesses. So this identification of data and the knowledge about where data has been and how it's consumed and everything all links to that concept of the circular economy and the Digital Product Passport. And that's where the EU is like saying, look, this is the direction we're going. This is the digital economy and a secure exchange of sovereign data that we need to do. We need to have open, transparent, and secure communication between external entities on data that is potentially sovereign. And how do we do that? And that's kind of the bigger picture that the EU is looking at.
Yeah, without getting too esoteric into software, it's like you're making your data, an object, you're identifying what is in that object, right? And then you're, either adding a blockchain or some other kind of tracking mechanism to that data object. So then either a product, which are physical components of the project, have data objects, or the data that product uses will also have a data object which will identify it, and then you can hand that from point A to point B and have properties from it and have a record of how it migrated from point A to point B to point C to the history of that data object, right? So that's
exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about a huge blockchain ledger distributed.
To say blockchain, that's one of those things that would actually do that fairly well, right? Like,
yeah, that's what they're looking at, and it's quite interesting. I was talking to the guy, I was saying, well, when you're looking at these type of distributed ledgers and the decryption and mining of these, it's a huge amount of energy to do that. Surely that's going against your green directive or more sustainability, and apparently they're solving this problem. I don't know how. I don't know any more information about it, but check out the Digital Product Passport and the EU circular economy. It's a really interesting picture on the direction they're taking.
Yeah, I could see that would really be efficient at supply chain management as well, because when you had good, data models, you would be able to go in and be able to find things and select things and figure out where things are and what components they have and pricing and everything else history. So that would be neat. So let's turn the corner here now. VMware, there's some blog articles, reference blog articles at the bottom of yours. It says, build your VMware sovereign cloud using our reference architecture. There's other articles out there. And then you have 4 papers that you're going to be, or at least sessions you're going to be at Explore Europe. And so I don't know where we should talk first. Like, what VMware obviously is, recommending an architecture for this, right? So we have solutions in this area, and as sure we have a consulting practice. Maybe we should talk a little bit about VMware, how we're tackling this. Then we talk about what sessions you got going on in Europe.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so VMware is kind of in a nice situation here, right? We've always been a bit like Switzerland. We're very neutral in terms of like how you want to consume your cloud infrastructure, whether you want to consume it from a VMware kind of on a hyperscaler, or you want to consume it in your own data centers or on premises, whatever it might be. So the fact of the matter is that our cloud providers who are sovereign validated, we first of all had to think, right, what does that mean? When you're sovereign validated, it means that they self-attest to a 20-point scale that we defined. And this covers all sorts of things like data access and integrity, data transparency, data security, data compliance. And they have to self-attest to that themselves. We check it's all good. And then they have to be cloud verified, which means they're deploying our VMware SDDC stack. And they're doing that, they have to prove that they've done it, et cetera, for a certain volume of customers. And then once they've done those 2 things, they qualify to get the Sovereign Cloud badge. And what that means is you've deployed either an instance of Cloud Foundation, or you've used our VMware Validated Design. And is it Validated Design now or Validated Solution? I think it's VVS, Validated Solution. And you've taken into guidance like the interoperability, the security, and everything else that we recommend in that design. And then it's really, one of the key things we focus on in sovereign is, and we hear this a lot of the time, is, you can't do the same services in a VMware cloud that you can do in a hyperscaler. And this is why, like, lots of customers say, well, that's great, you've got this sovereign stuff, but we need this sort of functionality that hyperscalers provide. And with our cloud provider platform, which is sovereign within a sovereign provider to the sovereign specification, we use products like Cloud Director. We use key management integration with ecosystem partners like Fortanix. Provide multi-tenanted KMS as a service. We use data immutability and ransomware protection with Cloud Director, Veeam, and Cloudian, an S3 object storage vendor. And then we bring in the rest of the innovation portfolio, the NVIDIA apps, the GPU support, the multi-tenanted GPU support, which is pretty cool. We bring in all the Tanzu portfolio, and now we're actually bringing in Tanzu Mission Control, which, it's a SaaS component. We've decoupled it from VMware, and you can run it now in your data center in an air-gapped environment. So we're bringing a lot of the innovations that VMware have into the sovereign environment. So, our customers of cloud providers can really get the most out of their VMware cloud.
Yeah, I look at I drilled down into the article that had the cloud architecture, reference there, and looking at it, and it's really like best practices for multi-tenancy, right? Like, that's, if I look at this, like, okay, it's it's your common stack, but then there is key management. There's other elements that just make this, and that VMware has provided the software that enables, I think 6 major points here that he's got in this article that calls out what you should be doing to cover these 6 major areas to make sure that you're not vulnerable, you're not sharing data across, you're doing the correct management pieces while running your multi-tenant environment. I assume you would still have to run this in a cloud in the country that you need to, but then that behavior, the management practices of all these points, and having the architecture and having the software components that allow you to run that is kind of what we're doing for people, right? Like, we're basically calling out all the components you need to operate.
Yeah, that's right. So, when I said a sovereign cloud provider has to be an independent operating body within that jurisdiction. So in the UK, we have 2 sovereign cloud providers currently. There's a few more in the pipeline. But these are guys with years of experience in dealing with healthcare, dealing with blue light services like the police, ambulance services.
Which have had to do all this already, right? This has just been their normal.
Yeah. These guys have been doing it for a while, right? I mean, VMware is not going to come along and say, hey, now you're suddenly sovereign. No, these guys have been delivering sovereign services for a long time. What we're delivering to them is a validated stack that we say, this is the best practice that we can give you. This will work for all of your sovereign requirements that require a certain software element. And this is our best practice guidance. So we recommend you implement this. The cloud providers implement it, and they use Cloud Director. I mean, you mentioned multi-tenancy, so Cloud Director obviously delivers that, but also, we do deliver those private clouds, in some cases air-gapped, which are completely secure and don't have any external access. And the really important thing to remember is a sovereign cloud is not just about the technology, it's about the people who operate it, right? So you've got to have 24/7 support, not outsource support to Manila or somewhere else. It's got to be in country. And if you're working with military or defense, they've got to be vetted people by that country. And then you've got to take care of, like, what is your CMDB? What is your service desk that you're using? And making sure it's not a SaaS solution, making sure it's not exposing any information it shouldn't be. If it is a SaaS solution, it has to be located in country, and it needs to be encrypted and all the rest of this stuff. So we're kind of looking at the end-to-end from a program initiatives point of view, and then we're providing the technology in the middle to kind of make it all happen.
All right, I have another question that just drops in here when we talk about, aside from getting ransomware, where you discover that you didn't have everything in place, right? Like, that's obvious how you failed. what is the policing? What is the safety checks, testing, whatever you will call it? How do you know, other than getting, ransomware or sued or something, how do you know where you stand in your implementation? Is there like standards? How do people know? Because I feel like, even the vExpert app when I'm building, nobody's coming knock at the door, except once in a while somebody does and does me an audit. But I'm wondering how customers are learning where they're at, and how do I get a grade on this stuff?
That's kind of down to the provider and the vertical that they're addressing, right? So if you're in financial, or if you're in healthcare, if you're in public sector, if you're in defense, military, police, whatever it might be,
they've got bodies that
they've already got all of this established. Like, we're not coming in there saying, hey, we're overlaying this auditing. No. We basically what we've done is we work with a company called Cavionics. They do risk foresight, and they do risk and remediation management based on a whole load of standards. They'll automate it into the VMware stack, and they cover vSphere, NSX, and all the core SDDC products. And then we've also extended ARIA. There's an ARIA sovereign cloud compliance pack, which looks at all of the potential exposures with some compliance standards involved there as well. But we can only do so much with the software. A lot of the compliance is external to how's your data center protected? Have you got dual access in the data center? Who has the key to the server room? All that type of stuff is outside the scope of software. So these guys already have auditors in place to do that.
Right. That makes sense. Before we run out of time, I do want to talk about your sessions in Europe, right? So you do have sessions, and I can read them out, but why don't you just you read out the numbers and tell me what each one of those are. I think you got 4 sessions at Europe that people can sign up to.
Yeah. So we got 1217, which is around application modernization, developer ready sovereign cloud. So that's what I talked about before. That's all of the Tanzu stuff. We've got Tanzu mission control now integrated with VCD. We've got all of the NVIDIA stuff, the GPU stuff, a lot of the AI stuff is all available already. So that would be an interesting one if you're looking at a sovereign cloud and you're wondering, what options are there for application modernization or innovation within that sovereign cloud.
Okay, so 1217.
Yeah, 1217. And then 1216 is the sovereign compliant multi-tenanted tenant encryption as a service. So that's kind of like bring your own key, but it's actually bring your own encryption. So this will enable customers to ensure that their data is going to be staying within their view of scope, and not even the providers in some cases, if that's what they wish. That's really about securing your cloud, and that's absolutely mandatory for when you go into like a shared sovereign cloud environment. So something that's using VCD, for example, not necessarily so much a requirement if you're in a dedicated, isolated, air-gapped private cloud, but equally you could use it there as well. Then we got 1648, and that is diving deeper into the Tanzu mission control, which is the SaaS service from VMware, which is now decoupled and can run on-premise with VCD. So we're going to dive into that, how that integrates, how that can provide value in terms of administration and visibility on all of your Kubernetes clusters. And VCD's done a lot of work in Kubernetes now. We have a plugin called Container Service Extension, and it's 4.1 release. We got container scalability. We got all sorts of cluster lifecycle management, tons of stuff in there, which is really good value for modern applications. So again, that one's focusing on more of the administrative side of modern apps. And then the last one is 1214. How is VMware innovation shaping global market agendas with sovereign cloud? So this is going to be more of a general sovereign cloud pitch, what we believe sovereignty is, which actually aligns to a number of other organizations in the EU, like CISPay is one, in terms of our 20-point scale. So, that will be talking about really what the market is for a provider if they would start looking at delivering sovereign cloud services, and also addressing different customers and what they should be thinking about from a legislation perspective, a data compliance perspective, a security perspective, and why a sovereign cloud would fit their needs and their purpose.
All right. Nice. God, you're going to be a busy person there. What I would say for people that are listening to this, all the sessions go live usually a week after Explore. So if you're not doing these in the US, which I know you're not, people can wait. You don't have to go to Europe in order to watch the session a week later. We publish them all. We open them up. So don't feel like you're going to be excluded because these didn't happen in the US. Just wait for Europe. And then a week later, you can go watch online, stream it at VMware.com/VMworld has all that stuff published in their content library now. So it should be good. So people can see that. The last thing I do, we've got like 8 more minutes left. I always ask guests, like, what excites you? Like, what keeps you up at night? The classic TED Talk kind of question. What keeps you up at night? Do you worry about either your career or technology or whatever? And what excites you?
Wow. Okay. What excites
it can be anything. It doesn't have to be on sovereign cloud. It's just whatever. We're
I'm a bit of a geek. I like all technology. I love my motorbike. That really excites me. So I have a Yamaha Tracer 750, which I absolutely adore. And getting out on that is just like, it's clearing your mind. It's amazing experience.
It is amazing. I have a Honda Vespa, just a little Honda, scooter, right? But even getting that and just put on a half helmet that I have and just the wind, just driving. It's just enlightening and freeing, right? Like,
I think unless you've ridden a motorbike, you don't really kind of understand it or get it. And
right.
You're like, why would you do that? It's noisy. You're getting, trust me,
it's dangerous. It's windy. It's all that, but there is just something about it. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's what excites me and what keeps me up at night. I don't know. The world's evolving quite quickly.
That's an evil question because there's like 1,500 things that you should be awake at because there's so many bad things happening right now.
Well, I'm reading this really interesting book called Life 3.0, and I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in AI to read it. Now, this book is, I'll give you the name of the author if you give me 2 seconds, but this book is really interesting because the one thing that keeps me up at night after listening to this book is AI and the potential for challenges and problems that AI is going to present. That's right. It's Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. And it's a great book. It explores all the possibilities of AI and what superintelligence could really do for us. It's an interesting philosophical kind of debate. I have a degree in computer science and philosophy. Don't ask me why, but philosophy is something that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the one thing that kind of concerns me with the way we're going with the AI train at the moment is there's no laws being imposed. There's no, people aren't even really considering data privacy when they're looking at AI at the moment. The synthetic data is only just kind of emerging as training algorithms using that data. I think it's a bit of the Wild West, and that always worries me, especially when you're looking at something like AI, which could have such huge repercussions for humanity and business.
That's worthy. That's a worthy concern, right? And it is one of these things, just like we were talking about the vExpert app, and we're busy building. Nobody thinks about, hey, what is going to happen? What are the ramifications of this when things start to go wrong, right? Like people start hacking us and stealing stuff, and next thing you know, you're ransomware, and they want $40,000 for the Bitcoin just to unlock one VM, right? So come on. Anyway, that's interesting. All right, well, we're nearing the top of the hour. We do live stream on youtube.com/vbarbecue, VBARBECUE. So if you want to look at what Guy looks like, you can just go look. We live stream it there. We do have cameras. Most people listen to this on audio on iTunes, but for those of you who want to go look, go to vBarbecue and give us a like and a follow. Fine, that would be nice. because it's V Barbecue and we try to have a little bit of barbecue at each one of our VExpert parties, we ask our guests, you're in the UK, do you do any barbecue over there when it's not raining? And if so, what do you do?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I had a barbecue on Sunday, actually. We managed to avoid the rain for one day. 12 people over, a ton of meat. We had kebabs, sausages, ribs, you name it. It was all on the barbecue that day.
Everything you name them all. I'm like, I haven't done any sausages this year, so I'm gonna have to go get. California has these Hispanic sausages that are like orangey color. I don't remember the name of them. They're a common name, but those are pretty good. You do steak with those things, and man, nice. So you had one. So you managed to get some good weather in the UK.
Yeah. And I managed not to burn the food for 12 people, which was the result.
It's a pretty place in the summertime, especially south of London, down in Bath and Bristol, and some of these nice rolling hill areas. Pretty nice, right out there.
When the sun's out, it's brilliant.
Yeah, Tony Foster, I know you're over on TalkShoe. There you are. You're unmuted. So do you have a barbecue report?
I do. Again, it wasn't super exciting, or at least what I barbecued last night wasn't super exciting. I just barbecued a bunch of chicken breast for various dishes that we're preparing the rest of the week before I head out to explore.
You can always do barbecue, even if you do it ahead of time for the week and make it for your lunchbox, right?
Yes. Though I did come up with a very interesting way to get my coals ready quicker.
Oh.
I had some old vegetable oil that was expired. And so I put that on my charcoal briquettes before I added lighter fluid.
Yeah.
And did the whole lighter fluid and everything, and lit my coals, and that old vegetable oil will sit there and get them ready a lot quicker.
I found it's a double-edged sword, because the quicker you get your coals ready, the quicker they burn out, right? Because they're gonna.
This is true.
It's an accelerant, right? And so it's gonna burn faster, and therefore you better get your cooking done. I made a brisket the other day. I think I mentioned in last week's podcast. I made a brisket, and I've discovered that I smoked it for 20 hours on a pellet smoker, and it smoked and smoked. I've just decided I don't like brisket. I don't like big, thick pieces of. Almost like a roast, right? With a barbecue on. I'm a much more of a lighter meat kind of guy, or just a piece of steak or chicken or fish or anything. The brisket for me was too heavy. It turned out fine. I think I overdid it by about maybe 2 or 3 hours, right? I think I brought it up to 160 degrees and then foiled it up and then let it run up until 180. But I felt like I could have stopped at 160 and it would have been more tender. I think I went a little too dry. But I've just decided that I'm not a brisket kind of guy. Sorry, just don't like
dry brisket is the worst.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I just made a piece of tough, big, giant hunk of. It was a 20-pound brisket too, so it was not. It was half a cow leg. I felt like our belly. I guess it's the bottom of the cow, the belly. But all right, well, that's the top of the hour. Another one's in the can. We'll be at VMworld next week. We're going to be doing a live podcast with Matt Lungeth and a special guest next week at the show. So we're going to have a lot of fun. Can't wait to see everybody. And if you guys are listening in Europe, we can't wait to go register and get set up. We're going to have a lot of fun learning how to make your own ChatGPT module in the code booth. That's where I'm going to be hanging out, and looking forward to seeing everybody. Guy Bartram, thanks a lot for being here. What's your Twitter handle in case people want to follow you?
Do you know what? I don't use it. If you want to,
there you go.
No, I gave up really.
Blog. He's on the
the blog.
He's blogging at Cloud Provider, blogs.vmware.com/cloud provider. All right, with that, it's lunchtime in California, so we're going to go get some lunch. And until then, thanks a lot, Guy. We'll talk to you all later.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.